Are we already in the early days of World War III? Two wars in the 20th century reshaped the entire world and earned the title World War. Borders were redrawn, empires collapsed, and global power was reorganized in ways that still define international politics today. But those wars did not start as world wars. They began as regional crises. The First World War began in the Balkans. The Second World War began with Germany's invasion of Poland. Yet within months, those regional conflicts pulled in major powers across continents. Europe, Africa, Asia, and the oceans between them all became battlefields. So the question historians and political scientists have asked for decades is simple. What turns a war into a world war? Understanding that question means looking back at the patterns behind the two largest conflicts in modern history, World War I and World War II. Despite their differences, both conflicts shared several defining characteristics. First, they involved rival great powers competing for dominance. In the early 20th century, rising industrial nations challenged the existing global order. In Europe, the growing power of Germany disrupted the balance that had long been dominated by Britain and France. Second, both wars were shaped by alliance systems. Before the First World War, Europe had been divided into rival blocs. Countries promised to defend each other if war broke out. What this meant was that a conflict between two states could rapidly trigger a chain reaction. And that is exactly what happened in 1914. When the crisis began in the Balkans, alliances pulled in Russia, Germany, France, and Britain within weeks. By the time the war expanded beyond Europe, colonial empires had drawn soldiers and resources from across the globe. Third, world wars depended on something historians call industrial-scale warfare. Factories produced enormous quantities of weapons. Railways moved millions of soldiers. Entire national economies were mobilized for war. For the first time in human history, war was not just fought by armies. It was fought by entire societies. But the world of the 21st century looks very different from the world of 1914 or 1939. Industrial factories are no longer the only engines of military power. Today, the foundations of warfare are increasingly technological. Artificial intelligence, cyber operations, satellites, and autonomous drones are transforming how conflicts unfold. The battlefield is no longer limited to land, sea, and air. It now includes space and cyberspace as well. Yet even though technology has changed, many of the deeper structural forces that produced world wars may still be present. One of the most discussed theories in international relations is called power transition theory. The idea is simple. Large wars are most likely when a rising power begins to challenge the dominant global power. History offers several examples. Before the First World War, Germany's rapid industrial and military growth created anxiety in Britain and France. Before the Second World War, expansionist regimes in Germany, Italy, and Japan challenged the existing international order. Today, many analysts see a similar dynamic emerging between different countries, for instance, the United States and China. China's economic and military rise has begun to reshape the balance of power in Asia and beyond. Another warning sign, historically associated with world wars, is the formation of rival alliances. During the 20th century, the world divided into competing blocs. Today, alliances still play a major role in global security and economy. The NATO continues to link North America and Europe in a military partnership. At the same time, strategic cooperation between BRICS countries such as Russia and China has increased in recent years. Another factor is the presence of multiple regional conflicts involving major powers. Before previous world wars, crises in different regions gradually became interconnected. Today, several geopolitical flashpoints exist simultaneously. The ongoing Russia-Ukraine war has already drawn in military aid, economic sanctions, and political involvement from countries around the world. Meanwhile, tensions remain high in East Asia over Taiwan, a strategically vital island at the center of great power rivalry. In the Middle East, conflicts involving Iran and Israel continue to carry the risk of wider escalation. Each of these conflicts on its own may remain limited. But history suggests the real danger emerges when crises begin to overlap. When rival alliances, rising powers, and regional wars intersect, the international system becomes far more unstable. This does not mean that a third world war is inevitable. In fact, several powerful forces work against it. Nuclear weapons have raised the cost of direct conflict between major powers to unimaginable levels. Global trade links national economies in ways that make large-scale wars extremely disruptive, and international institutions still provide channels for diplomacy and crisis management. But the patterns of history offer an important lesson. World wars rarely begin with a single dramatic decision. Instead, they emerge from a combination of long-term pressures and short-term crises. A rising power challenging an established order. Rival alliances forming across the globe. Rapid military and technological change. And regional conflicts that slowly become interconnected. These are the forces that shaped the great wars of the 20th century. The question facing the 21st century is whether those same forces are beginning to reappear. Because if history teaches us anything, it is that global wars are rarely planned in advance. They happen when the international system reaches a point where small crises can suddenly ignite something much larger.